In this chapter 6, I'd like to get into what is called an all-value study. So just to quickly recap, we did our compositional shape. We incorporated the grid. We wanted to also think about where we were going to be symmetrically or asymmetrically balanced or unbalanced. Then we also did the three-value study. And now we're going to get into an all-value study. Where do you want the viewer to look first, second, and third? Okay? So for me, where I want the viewer to look in this landscape composition, I want the viewer to look right at this little girl's face. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and we've spoken about this a lot on drawingtutorialsonline.com and in numerous tutorials, to get me to look somewhere first, you need to have a dark next to a light. To get me to look at somewhere last, you need a middle tone next to a middle tone. So that's what I'm going to do when I start to do this final value study. This could be considered a final sketch, a final value study. If this was for an illustration job, it would be a final sketch, but it's not for an illustration job. It's just a little bit more for teaching. So pretty much I'm going to put a black of her hair in the shadow side next to the white highlight on the top plane of her hair. So that's where I really want you to look first, and then I'm going to have some dark on the inside of her neck next to the white of her dress. This is going to be one of my blackest blacks on this shadow side of her hair, and it's also going to be very close. She's going to be very close to a black tree trunk or a dark, dark, dark tree trunk. So I'm getting you to look in the vicinity of this section by using the value contrast tool. Okay, so I've already, right away now, you look there first. Okay, so her face is in shadow, which is very tough to draw. So I'm just going to go a little dark with the eyes. Make this a middle tone. So I'm still trying to look at my three-value study. I don't want to abandon that. She's going to be prime. Now, I'm using all the values now. I'm not just using 3. So you're going to try on this to use the gazillion shades of gray figure of speech and manipulate. But again, the easiest way to start this is to start off with our safety net, and our safety net is just using middle tone. But I knew right off the bat that I wanted the viewer to look right at her face. So I went very black with that first. So now, black with the tree trunks, black with the fence as well. So let me get this tree trunk in. The other rule of thumb is things in the background, if you're going more of a traditional approach. Things in the background have less contrast, things in the foreground have more contrast. So if we go back and we think about, let's get this perspective, we think about the compositional shape. The whole idea behind the compositional shape, again, is to organize the light and shade in your image, but it's also to set the viewer up for the big overlap, the overlap of your main item or the overlap of your main character. So for me, here's my compositional line of my compositional shape. She's overlapping that, so it's great. You've got this overlap. So my eye is going to look at that overlap, and then you double whammy the viewer with the value contrast. So those two things alone, if you do those, if you incorporate that into your composition, again, you're going to be doing more than most people ever dream about thinking about, let alone implement, because it's one thing to know it. You still got to kind of implement this stuff. So this little drawing that I'm doing right now might take me a little bit longer than the previous one, but again, now I'm thinking about almost, some of this stuff does not have to be written in stone. You do the three-value study and you look at it like, well, okay, that was my initial idea, but now I don't necessarily like that. What happens now if I want to open the gate? And I wanted to have like a little opening in the gate, and I wanted to have this be like my horizon line. So I'd have like some posts here from the fence, or however I'm going to do it. And this perspective line of that beautiful cast shadow is all going to lead me to this openness. I can move these trees over ever so slightly. So now I'm starting to manipulate the values a little bit more. As I did my three-value study, I start to change things and manipulate and Doesn't mean because you do that 3-value study, it doesn't mean it has to be written in stone that that's what you keep. You could change things. And even this like little cast shadow that I'm doing over here in the photograph, it's pretty dark. I don't know if I want that to be so dark because I don't want you to look down here at her feet. She's wearing white socks. A lot of people make this mistake as well. Let's say they're drawing somebody and they have white socks or white sneakers and there's a cast shadow on the ground. They make that cast shadow black, and so my eye goes right to their feet. You don't want to do that. So just the whole purpose of everything that I'm teaching you here is to give you more control. Control breeds more success. Success breeds more confidence. And so it's this spiraling, upward motion that you have as an artist, which I think is great. So again, I'm not going to be so primitive with my values. I'm going to have all the different shades of gray. This is very important that you do this. Again, you could leave this last step out. This last step is more about the refinement process. And again, it depends on who you are. Are you a fine artist? Do you do 10 paintings a year? Do you do 1,000 drawings a day doing animation? Do you do hundreds doing comic books? Again, you have to figure out who you are, what you're doing, what type of time frame. So let's take the fine artist approach. Let's say you're a fine artist, okay? Let's just go with a landscape painter. And you're showing 20 paintings a year. Let's say 12. Okay, so my math is going to be very simple, and my time frame is going to be very simple. So let's say you've got a year to put together a gallery show of 12 paintings. So that means you're roughly going to devote like a month to each one. And if I was going to spend a month on a big painting, say like a 6x8 foot painting that's going to hang in the gallery, you bet I would spend a minimum of a day to 2 days of that 30 trying to figure things out. How am I going to do this? Is it working? Do I like this compositional study? I would do multiple compositional studies of the same idea, of the same scene, to give myself like options. Again, you're doing this to prevent all this heartache of, just diving in head first without any thought. And then you get these results that you're not necessarily pleased with. And then that's when the downward spiral happens of the frustration. Woe is me. Why can't I do a beautiful drawing consistently? Again, you make your mistakes very small like this. So we got to stay in tune now with the compositional shape of the L shape. Now let's also talk about, we spoke about where you want to look first, second, and third. I want you to look here first. I want you to look here maybe at these, oh God, I think they're geese. I can't believe this. I gotta double check. Let's just call them geese for now, okay? I want you to look at her first, geese second, perhaps, and out in the valley, rolling hilltops. I could change these trees here in the midground to rolling hills. And so maybe there's like a little valley thing happening. And if this was a painting, this would be very blue-purple versus all this yellow-green. That would be gorgeous too. So I'm going to do that. It's almost like a far-off, distant place I'm having you look. So basically, I've got my contrast right over here. I got more foliage. More black tree trunk. So you're looking at the highlight on the top of her hair. How are we doing with time? Oh boy. Well, I'm going to stop. I'm going to finish this off in another chapter.